Welcome to CoMotion Labs, Fundamentals for Startups. I'm Ashley Esteban, Associate Director of CoMotion Labs. Fundamentals for Startups is our regular lecture series open to anyone interested in learning about entrepreneurship and building a startup. Each week, we feature experts from various fields who bring you insights and inspiration and give you the opportunity to ask questions. All sessions are recorded and archived on CoMotion's website. For our full schedule and to register for future fundamentals, please visit bit.ly/CoMotion Fundamentals. CoMotion Labs is a multi-industry incubator program hosting early-stage startups from both inside and outside the UW community. We're committed to nurturing and enabling startup success through critical infrastructure, training, mentoring, and networking. We do this without taking any equity or IP. We operate out of 3 locations on campus, each with its own industry focus. The life science and hardware incubators are in Fluke Hall, and the technology incubator is located here at Startup Hall. If you're a founder looking for somewhere to thrive, we'd love to talk to you. Before I introduce today's speaker, I want to mention for next week's event, Madhu Singh, Chief Legal Officer of Foundry Law Group, will present best practices for using equity as a hiring and retention tool for your startup. Today, Ken Hornstein is here to present how to kill your startup faster and find great business ideas. Ken is founder and general partner of PAC Ventures. PAC invests in UW-related technology companies, primarily at the pre-seed and seed stages, investing in everything from consumer internet to deep tech. Ken has been directly involved in 30-plus early-stage startup investments over the past 2 years and front row to hundreds of investments at various venture firms. He helps founders with early company strategy, fundraising, and go-to-market. Ken will take questions in the live event space and also via the YouTube chat. I'll now hand it over to Ken.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everybody. This is a pretty full room. I love how formal this is. So I want to break that a little bit. And as you have questions, you can interrupt me at any time, yell it out, and I will try to answer things as we go here. So I'm Ken Hornstein. I'm from PAC Ventures. I always have just a generic disclaimer because my attorneys tell me to. But the first thing that we want to know is why should you even trust me? So not only have I been the founder and general partner here at PAC Ventures, we've backed 19 companies in a little more than a year, predominantly at those earliest stages. I've also been really involved in the angel investing community here in Seattle, and as a part of M12, really focused on early stage investments for Microsoft for almost 3 years. The other things that I've done that have been helpful and hopefully lend some credence here is I co-founded an accelerator that was specifically focused on how do you go from your idea on a napkin to something that you can actually sell, and then potentially something that you can fundraise off of and build into a venture scale business. And then I've also been through this process a lot. So you're getting my learnings of starting my own companies, and also my working with other accelerators and incubators. I've spent some time with Pioneer Square Labs. So some of these techniques are things that I've kind of pieced together after doing this multiple times. So today, what we're going to try to walk through, the first thing is how do you find killer hypotheses, and what is a killer hypothesis? And then how do you do really, really great customer discovery, because that's going to be the root of finding these really strong business ideas. And then we'll talk a little bit about how do you track those things so that you can get ready for a potential fundraising event, and you've got all that information in a way that's really accessible for your potential investors, your potential co-founders, people who might want to know whether or not your idea actually has legs. Sound good? Any questions so far? Okay. So when I say killer hypotheses, I literally mean something that will kill your idea. You're looking for something that, if positive or false, tells you whether or not you should keep going with your idea. So an example of this, for all of you, should be, will anyone pay me to create this product? Right? A lot of founders, especially, how many technical founders in the room? Okay. So your first intuition, we work with a lot of technical founders at PAC, is to create value. Right? Can this product actually do something for my customer? One of your core killer hypotheses should be, can I capture value back? Okay? The other thing, the way that I frame this that I think is helpful is what has to be true for this company to succeed. If that's more than one to three things, you don't actually know what it is yet. Keep asking why. Does this have to be true for this company to exist? Why? Until you get down to one or two things that really must be true. These are going to break down into one of three buckets. And so the way that we think about this as VCs is there's only really three areas that can go wrong in a startup. Either technically it's not feasible, so we call that technical risk, right? If you're doing a fusion reactor or some type of quantum computer, we're going to spend probably all of our time on the technical risk. How are you going to actually do this? But what's mostly true for the majority of startups I've seen, these are your SaaS businesses, your CPG businesses, even a service business, is what we call market risk. Does anyone actually want this thing and want it enough that they're going to pay you money that's in a sustainable way to keep moving forward? The third thing is what we just broadly call execution risk. Are you all the people who are going to actually execute on this idea within this particular market? And so at the earliest stages, when you're at the napkin idea stage, I was talking with some friends over drinks and we had this idea, we think it's interesting. Usually the two that you're going to focus on a lot, unless you're a PhD in life sciences, are going to be market risk and execution risk. Make sense? Cool. Okay, so how do you get through market risk and execution risk? In the earliest stages, it's all through customer discovery. It's trying to understand, does this problem actually exist to the severity that I think it exists? And will someone pay me to actually build this product? So here's my general advice. Stop building. I literally don't need you to have any product to come talk to me at the pre-seed level. I would love some design mock-ups, but you can do that in Canva, InVision, Figma, whatever you want. And that'll probably take you about 2 days to do. So just stop building and start talking to your potential customers. And the reason for this is we're trying to understand if you're going to be building a pain pill. So if you don't have this, if this customer doesn't have your solution, their life is going to be just miserable going forward, or a vitamin. And there's different language that we can talk about that you will hear that will help you understand if this is a pain pill or a vitamin. The other thing that I see a lot of founders miss on is they'll come to me and they'll say, Ken, our customers are so excited about this. We talked to 20 customers. We talked to 30 customers. They really want this thing. My next question is, how much are they willing to pay you for it? Well, we didn't ask them that yet. Well, then you don't actually know if they really want this product. You should be able, if you're doing customer discovery efficiently, you should be able to deeply understand the customer's pain points and then get to a place where it's like, are you willing to pay $10 a month for this or $1,000 a month to fix this problem? Go for it.
Do you have any tips for doing customer discovery when you don't really want to buy a sample? So I know a lot of times you'll talk to your friends or family, and then 90% of the time they're like, yeah, this is awesome, you should totally build it.
Yeah.
But then when you try to tap into your general market of people who don't know you, it's either very cold and spammy where you're like, hey, can I talk to you about this one thing? And then that would be your completely unbiased sample. Are there any tools or ways?
Yeah, we're going to dive specifically into this. So the question was, how do you not just talk to your friends and family and people who love you and are going to tell you what you want to hear, and talk to people who are actually your ideal customer profile and could be the person who's going to actually spend money on your product? So we'll talk through some of those techniques. Now, if you're doing this correctly, what you're going to do is you're not going to say, here's my product, do you like it? That is terrible customer discovery. It is going to be, what are your problems? What's your day-to-day? And you're trying to really understand this customer before you go out and you build a specific product for them. And as you go through this, I want you to track literally every single conversation. And I'm going to give you some examples of ways that this is done really well. But if you get to the end of this, always starting with the end in mind, and you think about, I want to come into a VC pitch, or I just want to spend the next 10 years of my life building this company, think about the type of data you're going to need. And that data should be trackable, verifiable, and as robust as possible. If you don't start doing that from your first customer discovery question, you're not going to have all of that information by the time you get to the end, and you don't want to redo it all. So from the beginning, invest some time in how you're going to track what these different customers are telling you they want to see. Okay, so let's get into the specifics of what these customer interviews are going to look like. And I'm going to actually start by telling a story of a couple friends of mine. I'll keep their names out of it, but this is a real story. So I've got two friends that work for two different big tech companies. One is a world-class designer. The other one's a world-class engineer. And they decided they were going to start a company that was in the engineering productivity space. Being builders, they went out and they built the product, they built the company. They spent about 4 months. They're pretty efficient between the two of them building this beautiful product. They brought it out to customers, and they brought it out to the venture community. They'd also previously sold a company before. So they're successful founders, not first-time founders. They have everything going right, where you would think a VC, all these stories you hear, oh, VCs just want to fund second-time founders, give people money who have product. Crickets for like 2 months. Couldn't raise $1, couldn't land a customer. So what they did is they stopped all the building, and they went out. One of them was still full-time on their big tech company, and the second one was full-time on the startup. They did 234 customer discovery interviews in 3 months. Every single one of them was 30 minutes long, and they had a minimum of a 30-minute recap to try to articulate their learnings afterwards. At the end of 3 months, they got $2.5 million from one of the best VCs in the area. But not only did they have that, they also had their next 9-month roadmap for their product. And they sold the company tip to tail within about 18 months. And so not only did the customer discovery help them understand what product to go build, they didn't even build an ounce of it. And they were still able to land millions of dollars in venture funding and then have the entire roadmap that they could go execute off of there. That's like the gold standard. That's what we want you to get to, so you don't spend 2 years, 3 years, 5 years just trying to understand, should I even be building this company? So how you're going to do that is, for me, especially if it's a software company, my minimum number is 50 customers. They are not going to all be perfect customers, and that's why you're starting so broad. I actually recommend people try to shoot for over 100. And out of this, you're going to probably get down to something like 2 to 5 of them who you're going to recognize patterns across and actually start to build your product for. So the idea is you're going to be somewhere in this like 5 to 10% that you're ultimately going to be your ideal customer profile. You're also just never going to stop it. So I don't want you to do 230, go raise some money, and then you're like, we know what we're going to build, and so we're done doing our customer discovery. This same company, by the time they got acquired, they were in the multiple hundreds of customer discovery interviews that they've been doing. The other thing that we'll take into this is this idea of standardizing. Write a script of what you want to say and put some level of rigor in how you're describing things to each of these customers. So when you get to the end of this and you're trying to think, okay, I think I have my product idea, you weren't asking a bunch of different customers about different feature sets or about different problem spaces. You actually have something repeatable that you can turn to. Okay, so a couple traps to avoid here. Don't tolerate a small sample set. If you feel like you are not sure if you should spend the next 10 years of your life building this company yet, your sample size is too small. That's my metric. I really don't care about surveys or like any of this, hey, we outsource this to someone else. At this stage, even if you're technical, I want you to have the conversations. Because the things that are going to convince not only yourself to build the company, but us as venture capitalists to want to put money in are going to be those little anecdotal stories that you're going to tell about your customer, which are going to convince us that you actually know your customer, right? I hate this like top-down market sizing. Gartner says the market's this big. What is much better is you get to the end of this, and you can get to a point and you can say, I talked to 17 of these particular individuals to get to our initial customer profile. Then I went and talked to another 30 in that customer profile. Here's what they look like and how many of them exist in the market, and this is what they're willing to pay to fix their problem. What they do, what their problem is, how many of them there are, how much they're going to spend to fix it. That's a good market size. That's how you know if you're onto a big startup idea or a small startup idea. And then it's up to you to decide, how do you want to spend your life? Do you want to spend it on this very niche thing that you're crazy passionate about and you want to have an impact there? Or are you trying to do something that you want to scale out and maybe you want to go for venture funding? That's a personal decision, but you want to have the data in front of you so you can actually choose the right path to go down. The very first discussion, I don't want you to sell your product at all. You don't even bring up your product in the first discussion. These first 100 or so conversations are about finding the people that you're going to follow up with a second time so that you can then start to talk more about your product and your vision and your pricing and all of those things. So this first one is about building a relationship and getting in the door so you can come back to them. I think I'm going to share this with everyone, just one sec, but there's also, I linked to a Mike Maples, who's one of the most successful VCs in the world, talking about good customer discovery here. I think it's a YouTube. So we can share that out as well. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm currently in this area of customer discovery, of formatting the survey and things like that. And I am confronted by the question, the difference between pseudoscience and science. If I'm looking for an answer and I'm leading questions to get to that answer, obviously trying to avoid that versus actually open-ended and really discovering what my customer is looking for. Any suggestions on not leading your customer to what you're looking for?
Yeah, so let me talk through this a little bit, and we'll talk through it in the realm of an outreach script. So what you see here is the most generic description of what this company does. Remote medical record coding. Okay? It's something very broad. And then what you're going to do is you're going to have a conversation about their pain points. You're not going to talk about your product. If their top 3 pain points don't include something that you're solving, you're probably not onto a pain pill. You're probably on a vitamin. That can be okay, but vitamins are sold and those kinds of companies are built very differently than this is a critical path thing that we are going to solve for them. So we have some more of examples in here of scripts you can use as well. But the way that this starts out for me is super generic. Hey, walk me through your day. What did you do today from the moment that you got to the office until we started talking now? I'm just really curious what the day in the life of a PM is. From there, you're going to start to hear some of the things that they think are important because they're just naturally going to go in that direction. Once you've gotten them to open up about that day and that week, okay, so what are your priorities for a given week? Okay, oh, for me, it's actually just getting all these reports done that track the progress of my team of 7. That's where I spend most of the hours of my day. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe you're working in that space, maybe you're not. Once you've built that rapport and you've got an idea, you can start to introduce your hypothesis about what you think is wrong in the process. So how many hours a day do you spend doing that report, writing? And how much of it is spent on communication and then backing up what you said? So what you want to start with is something very broad, but then you can start to introduce the problem statement, not the product. And that way you'll get them to start to say, no, that's not really a problem. Okay, that's a clear flag. Yeah, it's a problem, but we've got a tool, that's okay. Oh, interesting, what tool do you use? Now you're gaining more information down this path of, okay, what's a replacement for my product? So if you start there and you start at a problem introduction instead of a product introduction, how do you handle X? You're going to be much more successful of not biasing them. Does that make sense? Okay. So let me come back to this a little bit. So if you're a team, I want you to have the same script that you're sharing across your team, and I want you to have somewhere where you're keeping notes and your insights from each interview in a centralized location. Because the worst thing that can happen is there's two co-founders and one's asking questions about Z and the other one's asking questions about A, and your data never comes together. So be really intentional up front about structuring this in a way that you're going to capture the information. I also recommend the first 5 to 10 of these you do as a team, because you're going to see different questions that your co-founder has asked, and then you're going to say, "Ooh, that was a really good question. We should make that standard in the rest of our script." And that way you're still kind of recentering on, are we asking similar questions and getting to the same outcome. The other thing, depending on what space you're working in and your type of product, that I've seen be really, really successful are these recording the interview, so then you can do some type of transcription afterwards. Because what I love to see in a pitch deck is like an actual quote about how much something sucks for a customer, and then you're immediately like, and we magically fix that, right? But if you don't record those things in the moment, you're going to be searching for those types of clues and comments later on when you're building your pitch deck. Does this make sense? So this is more for your internal. It's not as focused on your pitch deck. You should be intentional about recording who you think your customer is. This is where they work. This is the type of work they do. Clayton Christensen's very famous for this philosophy, or what are the jobs to be done. These should not be super generic. You should try to refine them over time and get into something specific, okay? So this is something that you might make before you start your initial customer discovery interviews, and then you might change this 5, 6, 20 times as you go through the process. Okay, so I have a couple examples of different outreach scripts that have worked for me in the past to get to some level of, hey, we sent out 100 of these and we got maybe 5 to 8 of them to respond and actually engage. I think what's really important here is leverage the connections that you already have that might be further off. So, hey, I know this person, we're connected on LinkedIn, but we don't really know each other. That's a great place to start, because then you have something familiar with them. And they're going to be a little bit more honest with you than your first circle or second circle connections. The other thing that you want to make sure you do, you should be able to easily get to, LinkedIn is such a powerful tool. Like, you can go in and you can do by role, by company size, all of these things to get down to your exact persona. This is literally what I did to fundraise my venture fund, is I spent hours on LinkedIn. Who are people that are this level of title at their companies, maybe have a connection to the University of Washington, and then I just started shooting them mails one by one from there, okay? The other way that you're going to make sure that you talk to enough people, if you find someone who's that ideal customer profile, then you ask them, who else do you work with that I should talk to? Are there 3 names that you would either mind introducing me to, or if you don't feel comfortable, like, give me their name and I'll just try to reach out on LinkedIn, and I don't even have to reference that you recommended us if you don't want me to. You can end up extracting out, like after your first 30 of these conversations, you can end up extracting out the next 50 to 75 of those conversations too. Okay, here I talked through this a little bit, but some of this kind of example script, how do you actually do this well? So the first thing you're doing is you're trying to build a relationship with these people so that you can continue to come back to them with additional questions. But you can also then ask them for introductions to other people. And if they end up being part of that final ideal customer profile, you can come back to them and maybe ask them to be a design partner for you. The other thing is, you don't want to assume that you know what their role is. So I love when founders come to me and they're like, I was an engineering manager for 12 years at Microsoft. Alan, I'm going to use you. I used to hire all kinds of people, so I've been through this hiring experience, and so this is forming my opinion of our product roadmap. That can quickly lead to a trap of building for one, and building for one type of role. So even if you know their title and it's similar to what you've experienced before, Get them to describe what being successful in their role means, because that's how you're going to start to build a more generalizable product that can fit not just engineering managers at Microsoft, or not just engineering managers at Amazon, or not just, I don't know, maybe you're creating a wine company, not just like red wine drinkers, right? You can start to expand out who your target is. When you're bringing forward your problem statement, I really love the tell me a story about the last time you experienced, you tried, you did, you were responsible for problem. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring out all those little nuggets of, oh, they don't know that this is important, but they brought up the fact that they couldn't, convince the rest of their team to jump on board to fix the problem for, they brought that up 6 times. You're going to note those things in the back of your mind and be able to take that as something you could build towards. The other thing is sometimes they're not going to frame it as a problem. So you could say, when's the last time, or tell me a story about the last time you had to hire a new engineer for your team. They might not say that it was bad, right? They might not come out and just inherently say, oh, it just really sucked. I had to go through this whole HR process. They might make it sound really positive. So that's your chance to then say, what were the things that you didn't like about it? What was really tough? And you can introduce and try to get them to remember that moment that they didn't enjoy. And that could be a basis of your product or your startup idea. The other things that are really important to do is, what is the hardest part of this? Why was it so hard? Right? So now you're trying to get them to quantify what was difficult. And then the last part of this is getting into current solutions and how they would fix it. So you want to be able to identify all of the competitors. The competitor might be pen and paper. It might be software. It might be other human beings in their network. That is very relevant to know. A lot of companies that we see are like replacing Excel. Like Excel is just so universal. You want to know that, right? And you're trying to then understand, is this a type of company or a business idea where I have to actually change the behavior of this particular user and bring them out of the thing that they're used to using every single day? That's something that you want to come out in these customer discovery interviews. And then the last question is about getting them to design your product for you. So if you had a magic wand, how would this be better? If you didn't have to do it the way that you did it now, what would you do differently? How would you want to do this differently? These are the types of questions where when you sit down, again, starting with the end in mind, you sit down across from me and you're saying, Ken, we're trying to raise $2 million. We really think that we know our customer and we really think that we understand the space. And I say, well, how do you know that? And you say something like, well, the 12 customers that have signed letters of intent with us, all 12 of them out of the 85 that we interviewed, they all wanted these same 3 features. And these 3 features are going to replace Excel for them. And they're probably going to spend anywhere between 45 and 2 hours a day in this tool based on how they're already doing their work. Holy crap. That's incredible insight in customer discovery. I know that you know your customer, okay? Those are the types of responses you're trying to get to at the end of the day. No matter if your product is a software product, a CPG product, is, okay, this is absolutely desired and wanted by our end customer. Other areas that you can look into, the second one, or the purchasing power, might be a better follow-up question, but you will know this in the moment as you're having these conversations. So trying to understand how much do they spend on those replacement tools, very important. But you also are trying to understand, are they the end approver or buyer of this product, or do you actually have to not only go to their manager, but their manager's manager to get this thing approved? That's going to come up in our diligence as we're talking to you about, hey, is this a startup worth pursuing? Okay. Again, that might be better for a follow-up conversation once you've really built some interaction with them. But I've been on some customer discovery calls where that came up in the first call because the person was just very chatty and wanted to share how they work. And then, again, you're going to come back to this. how do you leverage that one successful experience to then get introduced to more people that you can interview? So most of this so far was about software companies because most of my background is in software companies. So I want to take a moment and talk about how you could potentially do this with both a physical product and potentially in the life sciences space. Okay? Are there any life sciences founders? Yes, we got one. Okay. Any CPG? Like anyone building a physical product? Okay, we got at least one. Is everyone else software? Who's not software? Raise your hand. Okay. Okay. I'm still going to give this CPG example too because I think it's interesting. So I'm super passionate about wine. I'm a sommelier on the side. And I also go to Italy pretty regular because I studied abroad when I went to UW in Italy and I speak Italian. So I thought it would be fun to start an importing company to bring in Sicilian wines to the US. So this is literally what I did to know if I should start this company. I actually talked to my friends and family because they like wine too, and so I didn't see a need to initially go outside of that market. But I reached out to 175 of my closest friends and family, and I sent them a mail that said, hey, I have a bunch of Sicilian wine. You all have, at some point, enjoyed drinking wine with me. We're thinking about starting a company that would bring these wines in, and also you could subscribe to those wines. I'm going to host some tastings to, one, see if you like the wine. This is a legitimate question for me because most people have not had Sicilian wine in Seattle. So this is my technical risk. Can I actually get good enough wine that people are going to like it? And then I want you to come, and if you like the wine, you can sign up, and if you don't like the wine, you can just enjoy one good afternoon drinking wine with me. That one process led to about 65 signups once we hosted a tasting event. We did it over 2 weekends. I bought the wine. They came in, I told them about the wine, we tried it all, and 65 people signed up to buy the wine. The whole thing cost me about $400 to do. And those 65 people would end up representing somewhere around $4,000 to $5,000 in revenue. Okay, that's a pretty good return on a very low investment. So that's one thing I've done like on the product side of things. If there's a way for you, I'm not an importer, I don't have a retail shop, I just personally purchased the wine, and I found a corollary product, something that was like similar enough, and I used that as a way to understand were people willing to pay for this thing. So if you're in the product space, you can do that, but you can absolutely apply that to whatever your startup is. Hack together an MVP. I've done this before where we had a beautiful front end and we promised all these algorithms on the back end, but it was actually just Google Sheets and us hand looking at things in the back and giving recommendations. Totally valid. Okay, the second example. We were thinking this is when I was at Pioneer Square Labs. We were thinking of starting a new business that was actually in the insurance underwriting space. Not very sexy, but I used to work in that industry, so I had some experience. So what we did is we identified the types of customers that we thought would be a good fit. We spun up about 8 landing pages for a total cost of about $100. Each of them had 3 different messaging options for each of the 8 landing pages. The 8 landing pages were identified to the different customer profiles that we wanted. And then we spent about $300 on ads for each of the 8 landing pages and tried to see how much it would cost us to drive traffic to this particular business. The principle of the business was that we thought there was an arbitrage in 2 areas. One, we could get people more efficiently online because this particular type of insurance product was not being sold online in that way. So that's one of our killer hypotheses. If we can't get them cheaply online, this business will not work, okay? The second one was, can we actually build the AI algorithms that will do the financial underwriting to provide the end product? So we were doing technical risk and market risk at the same time. I was there for 1 week. We killed the idea. Who wants to guess which one of those killed the idea? Technical or market? Market. It was going to cost us almost the exact same amount of money to go get every single customer as it was that we were going to make on each of those customers. Killed the idea in a week. That's great. You know, brush your hands off, go on to the next idea, start that process all over again, maybe reuse the template websites, change the language, different product. So the idea here is how can you rapidly iterate through these things? My CPG product, we did that in a total of 4 weeks from tip to tail. This software product, we did it in a week, tip to tail. That's what you want to get into this process of doing. Additionally, while we were doing the click-through rate analysis, we were also calling down people that were in the extended network to see if this problem also resonated with us in case there was, we just weren't getting to the right people through this online method. But the idea is, okay, we had a structured process for both of these. We knew what the outcome was that would tell us that this was a killer idea to move forward with, or we should just kill the idea. And then we just systematically went through it as a team and captured all that data in one place. Okay, I think that's the majority of my talk because I want to leave a lot of time for questions too. The other thing I'll just say quickly is we've got some links here that can help you kind of short track some of these resources. The one that I would recommend to every single technical founder is Talking to Humans. You'll read it in a weekend, but it's honestly, it's just story after story like I told you, but with engineers who are way smarter than me, who are building very technical products. And it gives you a lot of great tools in that book to be able to speed this process up and how to find ideas a little bit faster. Cool. All right, I'll turn it over for questions. What kind of questions do we have?
Do you typically have kind of a gesture of goodwill for people to take the time to talk to you, or does it add bias? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it can add bias if it is the first, if you lead with that. So please stop doing, you're going to be in a raffle for a $50 gift card if you fill out my survey. One, I as an investor don't even care about your survey results. Two, if you have to spend the next 10 years of your life, do you really care about the survey results? Like, are the survey results going to convince you to spend 10 more years building this thing? It's probably going to be that human-to-human interaction. But I have seen a few people, especially if they find someone who they think might be a design partner, like, man, we just had the most awesome conversation. We might end up coming back to them. I'm going to send them a coffee, or I'm going to send them something just as a goodwill. I think that's fine. I think it all also comes down to don't put it up front because then you're just biasing them to do the thing for the reward. And then the second thing is I try to kill ideas as cheaply as possible. So if you go out and you're interviewing, 250 people, keep in mind what your budget's going to be. That's my 2 cents.
As an investor, do you typically like seeing a number of interviews that has been done, or like the position and title of the people you've been interviewing?
The position and title, to start with the second one, only matters in so much that it got you to an ideal customer profile. Okay? So if you talk to a bunch of senior engineers, but you're selling your product to HR, that's going to be an issue, right? Like there's an obvious disconnect there. But besides that, I don't care if you talk to the chief technology officer or like an engineer too. It just depends on who you're going to sell the product to. Number of interviews, I'm really hesitant when someone's below 30. I'm like, well, have you really talked to enough people? Do you really know what's going on here? Anyone who's close to 100 or more than 100, I'm like, you just proved 2 things to me as a VC. One, you're gritty and you're just willing to do really dull, not sexy work that has to be done and is probably going to be the next 5 years of your life anyways in some capacity, so that's a great sign. But then I start to trust that you've actually seen enough data to pattern match. Yeah. One other quick thing, because you're our life science person. Most life science companies the majority are technical risk. Like if you're building a cancer drug, I know there's a market there. Like we don't want cancer to exist. If you can solve that, that's great. So it's a little bit different. Like customer discovery can be different for life sciences. You should be focused on how does my invention, my platform, my drug translate, and do I know the translation process enough to actually know that I'm building something of value that could be turned into a benefit for the patient. That's where I see a big gap, is they're just like, oh, we're going to create, this next great compound. And then the inventor knows nothing about the FDA process, getting to IND, what, a good portfolio of targets looks like because they've never gone through commercialization. So even we often have invested in folks who don't necessarily have that experience, but then we're trying to rapidly bring them mentors where it's like, you don't need this for the next 6 months, but then you're going to need it in spades. So, yeah.
Thanks. What's your opinion of offering your product for free just in exchange for feedback or logos, really, just to get people on board and prove value versus offering it once you kind of have a sense of your ideal customer profile and willingness to pay, like actually offering it at that rate just at the beginning?
I think you're scared to ask for money. That's what my gut reaction tells me. But some products are meant to be free because that leads to the adoption of the more expensive product. That is totally okay, and I love that. If you have some type of freemium where it's like, in fact, we have a company we've invested like this. The first 2 features, which are incredible features and get them customers at less than $1 a piece, amazing. But then a huge percentage of them pay to convert for the next 3 features, which are their killer features. That is completely reasonable, and I totally support that. But if you're solving a problem that's really valuable to the customer, they should be willing to pay you for it. Yeah.
Hi. So during my customer development interviews, I recognize a pattern that I record all my interviews. And at the end, I say, okay, I'm going to stop the recording, and Zoom makes this noise. Recording stopped. And that's when a bunch of interviewees kind of reveal themselves and then start spitting out even more feedback and even more insights. And sometimes it's even more insightful than what they were saying when they were being recorded. So I thought about, before the meeting, say, I'm going to record everything. Could I record I can click and it says stop recording, but I still have a recorder? Or is that sketchy? Or like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's a little sketchy depending on what you're talking about. But here's a side note, and so maybe it's not that different than what you're talking about. I love doing customer discovery in pairs because one person is just like furiously typing notes and capturing it all. You don't have that moment of having to record it. And the second thing is your ears are different than my ears. I thought I heard A was important, but you heard C was important. Now let's talk about that. Instead of me coming to our next co-founder meeting with conviction that we got to go solve A, and you don't have that same data to be able to have a healthy conversation with me. So that's another way that you can do it. You never have the recording, release, if that's helpful. It's a good hack.
Thanks so much for the talk. I was wondering, when you were talking about specifically the company killing process you went through, like whipping up 8 sites, I know technically all that stuff is cheap in terms of like the GoDaddy costs and the Squarespace stuff, assuming you have the skill set to build the site and like design things well. If you don't have that skill set and you're not technical, do you have any good resources to outsource that to somebody for not $300 or $400, but maybe not 50 grand, something like that?
Yeah. Is the goal to get, what's the goal? To get click-through rates to a landing page?
Exactly, yeah.
So, yeah, you might, I don't know if I have a great hack. Like, it might just be worth investing the time into learning how to use these different tools, to be honest. I don't know if others have used agencies or people who've done this. Most agencies, they're not going to take you on unless you're spending 25 to 50K is the problem. So this is my other hack. If you're not worried about the click-through, but you just want to talk to people, I've actually done this before. I used Mechanical Turk, and I actually stole this hack like 15 years ago when I was at a startup weekend in the Bay. And I used a Google Voice and I put this ad up on Mechanical Turk that said, hey, if you fill out this survey, you get like 5 cents, 10 cents. But if you fill out this survey and then you're the right person, then here's a Google Voice number that you can call, and we'll do this chat, and I'll ship you a $10 gift card. So first there was a little bit of a filter to see, like, do you fit my demographic? Because I don't want to just talk to a bunch of people that don't fit. And I turned on Mechanical Turk one afternoon for like 5 hours, and I had, I don't know, half a dozen to a dozen customer discovery interview calls that way. So I think it cost me somewhere less than $100 to do all of it. Yeah. They might have stopped allowing that. But it's worth checking out.
I have a question from YouTube, from Mark. Do you have any tips on developing the skill of following up on the unexpected but relevant statements made by the interviewee, things that are off script?
I think before you waste the interviewee's time, or before you invest too much in that, I would just add that particular thing, whatever it is that they brought up, if it's really compelling to you, to your next couple calls. And just see if it keeps being relevant in the next couple calls so that you can get a little bit more validation. The other thing that I have seen is, if you do this in a way where you're legitimately trying to learn from someone and they don't feel like this is a transaction, then most of these people will talk to you again. And they'll do it over email, they might hop on the phone again. And so I've also done it where it's like, hey, we talked about this thing, I've learned a little bit more, so now I have a question that's in this a little bit adjacent space. How do you think about this? You can just answer on email. So it's like, once you've kind of got people into the net of, all right, we're focused on customer discovery, you know that I'm just trying to learn from you, you can oftentimes go back to them, and so you shouldn't feel like, shoot, this insight, now I have to go find another 100 people on this one insight. You can keep asking people within your same ecosystem.
So one of my favorite quotes related to customer discovery that I'd love to get your opinion on is that people will tell you they want a faster horse instead of a new car. Maybe you've heard that before. And so there's kind of the two problems of like teasing out the problem from what they're talking about, but then also the problem of you show up afterwards with this amazing new invention and you're like, hey, this is the solution to your problem, but then they're just like totally blown away and don't know what to make of it.
Yeah. How many of you have heard the statement that Steve Jobs didn't listen to customers? Okay. What he actually said was, I hate focus groups. I listen to customers every single day. So to me, like, this is kind of in that same vein of, oh, you maybe just didn't listen exactly to what the customer needed. Google Glass is a perfect example of this. AR and VR are not even quite yet back to Google Glass from 12 years ago, 15 years ago. They just skipped the entire human understanding part of this is how a technology gets adopted. So yes, your genius as a founder is to understand that you should be building the car and not a faster horse. But you should also understand that they're going to want to sit in that thing and not stand in the thing. I don't know if you guys have seen like early cars, people stood and they drove like this. Like there was all these different things where it didn't fit the way that they were used to using the old tool. That's where your genius as a founder has to come in. And it could also be part of that step-by-step progress. We're going to have them do it this way to start. But what we want them to get to is this. We just know it's going to take a while before we can get them there. That's really good for a lot of founders to be able to do, instead of like, oh, we're going to completely rip and replace their entire processes, and they're just going to obviously want to use what we're doing now. Probably not true. Probably tells me that you haven't done enough customer discovery to know how they actually operate.
Another question from YouTube, from Justin. Can you talk about transitioning from that stage where you take and integrate initial feedback and to where you lock in your concept and basically bet on yourself and what you've defined?
Love this. Okay, so we didn't cover this today, so great question. I think it was Justin. So once you get done with these first, let's call it 200 customer discovery interviews, you're going to have some key patterns that you've seen. And you're going to take your expertise as a founder and translate that into what are the initial feature set and value propositions for those initial customers. If you want to crush it, and this goes back to the story of my friends who got funded just off the customer discovery interviews, they identified the 3 core features of their product. They went back to they had actually 8 folks who were like the same problem across them. They went back to those 8 and they said, we're going to build a product that has these 3 features and these 3 benefits. If we build this, we think it's going to be priced somewhere in this range. What do you think it would be valued at within your company? All 8 of them signed, yes, a letter of intent. If you build something with these 3 features, their particular product I think was in the $30,000 to $50,000 a year range because it was enterprise software. We would be willing to pay you this amount of money for those feature sets. That's what they brought into the VCs and said, we just need money so we can go build this product over the next 6 months. And then we automatically have $300,000 a year in revenue waiting for us. I love that. I'm like, take the money, yes, because you're technical, you know how to build this, you're not doing fusion, so I believe that you can build this thing. That's that next transition that really tells you, okay, I can hit the ground running, I can go out and get some venture funding. That's what I would want to see. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Because I get a lot of like, how do you do a good LOI question? I'm happy to go on to something else, but was that a question about the LOI? Yeah. Okay.
Well, not exactly about the LOI, but somewhat related. A lot of investors ask for traction, especially once you have a product. Now it's almost like, okay, you are past the customer discovery phase, and even if you are just raising pre-seed, they just focus on, okay, you have a product, now show me your traction. And how do you overcome that if you're just starting and now you need the money to actually start building some of that traction? And many investors just don't like looking at letters of intent, and they actually want to see real revenue traction.
Ooh, then they're probably not the right investor for you. Like you're talking to someone who's too late for you, they're the next round investor. If they're truly a pre-seed investor, if you came to us, me or T's on my team as well, if you came to us and you're like, I'm a pre-seed company, I've got 12 letters of intent, each one of these is for $1,000 a month for our software, here's the initial design phases of what we're going to go out and build, we would take you very seriously. That would be like, okay, this is a real opportunity, there's something here. Usually what I see is, we've got a couple parts of the product, but we can't show you what the whole product's going to look like yet, even if it's just design. It doesn't have to be in code. We've got 2 customers that are willing to pay for this. By the way, they're like my best friend and my best friend's brother. Then it's like, okay, so you haven't proven that you can go get customers. And to your point, they're fully in your inner circle. So how much do I really trust this? Is that helpful? Okay.
Oh, do you ever do customer discovery in person? I noticed you also mentioned text messages. Any thoughts on the sufficiency of particular types of communication mediums?
So in person would be great. It's just so hard to schedule with people in person now. The next best option is a Zoom call because you want to see people's facial reactions when you ask them a particular question. You want to see them thinking about it. You want to see if it's something where they're just like, no. Those are really important signals for you. Next best case would be telephone. You're just going to miss a lot of information on telephone. And then usually like email or texts or things like that are really good for follow-up questions where you're like, hey, can you answer this specific thing? But they're not as great when you're like, tell me just broadly about how you feel about this particular area or this particular problem. That's another thing with surveys. Surveys are really good if you need very specific quantifiable data. I'm all for surveys on that. Like, it could actually be pretty good on price. Hey, this competitor that we are going up against isn't very forthcoming on their pricing. Although I would say you should just call them and ask them what their pricing is. But you could go out to all these people that you know are using the product and be like, hey, do you pay between this or this or this or this? That's fine. That kind of information is fine for a survey.
Here, I'll go first. This is maybe a strange question. What if I collect a bunch of data from customer discovery and I decide to kill my startup and do something completely different? Could I sell the data in the open marketplace?
Actually, I've seen an idea for that, but I don't know. I chalk that up as just a win because you didn't just spend the next 2 years chasing a path that you shouldn't have chased. Yeah, there's a lot of those kind of like consumer research companies that are trying to gather this type of data, but yeah, I think that's your best bet is just to kill the idea.
When the people that you have that will use your product aren't necessarily the people that will pay for it, so you've got users and then customers, when you're doing customer discovery, would you prioritize one group over the other? So for example, if you're developing something for students, and students are the ones that are going to be using it, but your go-to-market strategy is to get universities to purchase like some sort of license, where would you prioritize the customer development interviews?
Yeah, I follow the money because, again, if you can create value, it doesn't matter if you can't capture value because you won't be a sustainable business. So you could multiplex them, do it at the same time, but I would follow the money. Anything else? How are we doing on time? Pretty good? Love it. My email is ken@pacvc.com. I also have office hours on our website for UW-focused founders. So, yeah, happy to connect with everybody.
Thank you all for joining us today, and a big thank you to Ken for sharing his wisdom and experience with the group. As a reminder, next Friday at noon, we'll be hearing from Madhu Singh, who will present best practices for using equity as a hiring and retention tool for your startup. Sign up for that, and we'll see you all next week.